You know, Ryan, it seems like with the Eagles this year, there's so much positivity and the expectations are so great. And we spend a lot of time talking about depth on the roster. You know, Carson Wentz, him coming back, the weapons that Howie has put around him at both wide receiver, running back, and tight end.
Yep.
Some of the moves they've made on defense to kind of reshape their pass rush. And we speak about the Eagles, and rightfully so, about their potential, about how good they can be. And I would like to actually talk with you and John McMullen, who we bring on now, courtesy of the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. John McMullen, of course, from 97.3 ESPN, about some of the cracks in the foundation that we haven't been talking about because the team looks so good on paper, but might be there kind of beneath the surface waiting to come out, and things that we just should talk about. I'm not trying to be a downer or a negative. I'm just saying we spend 90% of the time talking about how good the Eagles look on paper, and the training camp is it starts, Thursday, right?
So this is the second straight offseason for me. Well, last offseason was a little bit different.
Sorry, training camp starts tomorrow. I should have meant tomorrow.
Yeah, it's all right. You were close. It's a little bit too much positivity is my point.
A little
right?
like you're worried that wait a minute, it can't be this good, right?
Right, being in this area, Philly's used to negativity. And with this team, it's like there's so much positivity. They're so loaded on paper. It's like, what's going on here? Something's fishy.
Yeah, well, let's bring in John McMullen and talk to John about it, because, John, I think, rightfully so, we speak a lot about all the moves that were made to make the Eagles into contenders this year, and I think that for the most part, we expect that to happen. So outside of Carson Wentz has to stay healthy, which is what everybody already knows when we do talk about something negative, it involves Carson Wentz and the health. Is there anything that you look at and you say, I have real serious concerns about the Eagles as they enter training camp tomorrow about this particular part of the team?
Yeah, there's really three different things, and I threw in a fourth, which will surprise some people. But the three concerns from a talent standpoint, to me, are running back, which I think they're much improved, but they're still not great. It's clearly the only position where you can say, you know what, in this division, they're the worst in the division still at running back. Then linebacker behind Nigel Bradham, and even with Nigel. I mean, Nigel's a solid player. He's not a star. So you need to find that second linebacker in the nickel. I don't think Zach Brown it can be that guy. I think he's fine as a downhill player. And then the third would be defensive end, where I understand why they've gone in the direction they've gone, but when you lose Michael Bennett and you lose Chris Long, that's a lot of production. And it's not just, you're not going to just snap your fingers and replace it. So those are the three things. I don't think they're quite as good as people think they are at those three positions. And then the off the beaten path is just how many skill position players they have. How does Doug keep them all happy? How does that happen?
No, it's a great point.
I think part of it is helped by the fact that Miles Sanders and J.J. Arcega-Whiteside are rookies, and even Dallas Goedert is a second-year player. So they probably don't have the cachet to say, I need to be playing more, I need the football. But if you think about this offense and the fact that, Doug says the game planning starts with 86 and 17, and that's Zach Ertz and Alshon Jeffrey. So right off the bat, you have to say, is Deshaun Jackson going to be happy with probably impactful touches, but few touches? He hasn't been happy in the past when he hasn't gotten traffic. So why is he going to be happy now? And then I would say Nelson Aguilar's on a contract year. Jordan Howard's on a contract year. They're fighting for their second contract, whether it's here or most likely in another city. How do you get a big contract? Production. If they're not getting production, are they going to be happy? So I think that is something that people don't think about that could be a problem. Now, managing personalities has been a strength for Doug Peterson, but I think it's going to be more difficult this year because they have so many weapons.
Yeah, it's an interesting, narrative there. Not that you're creating a narrative, but it's just an interesting way.
I created it.
Okay, all right. I didn't know if you wanted. I didn't know if you wanted the props or not, John. You want the props. All right. So McMullen is on record. Got it.
No, I'm joking. I think I don't know if I'm the only person that has thought about that. I think people will think about that. I think it will become an issue with some player. I can't tell you who. At some point this season, I think somebody's going to be unhappy. But there is a lot of talent on that offense.
There definitely is. But this is the culture that has been created here in Philadelphia, right? Like, this is the Patriots, but not the Patriots. Like, the Patriots way, but in the Eagles version, where it's not like military form. They have fun. Right, yeah. Exactly. And it comes down to winning, and it comes down to Doug Peterson. Yeah. That's where the pressure lies because – Djax has to understand that he's not getting any younger, and teams are going to come in and take him away, and that's going to open up things for other players. And you say, well, players in contract years, they might not be happy if they're not getting a ton of touches, but if they're in the Super Bowl, that should help them in a contract year for other teams, right? Like if you're the last
I don't
team
think it
playing,
will, and that's part of the issue. Okay. I don't, when teams teams are not excited because you won the Super Bowl. I mean, I think they'll be thrilled if the Eagles go to the Super Bowl and they get a ring.
What about, Trey Burton, he got a nice sized contract with Chicago after the Eagles went to the Super Bowl.
That's true. And you can go all the way back. There are certainly certain players that maybe aren't stars that do get the Super Bowl glow. You can go all the way back. I remember Alvin Harper. I couldn't believe the deal he got from those great Cowboys teams. So you're right, it can happen, but it happens a lot easier if you got a lot of production and more than that pass. And you hit on something that's completely true. Culture, by and large, is about winning. So winning helps, creates a lot of positivity, cures a lot of ailments when you're winning. And I do think Doug is better than most coaches when it comes to managing personalities. But that said, look, if things don't go as positive as we expect them to go, that's when those types of things crop up. And they crop up all over. It shouldn't be any surprise. I mean, and Jeff can speak about this as well. Things do not exist in a vacuum. I mean, if you just go to the day-by-day daily grind of practice, maybe a player is in a fight with his wife or girlfriend. Maybe they're not feeling well. There's all these sort of things people don't think about. And contracts are a big thing to players. And their ability to get a big second contract should not be underestimated.
Yeah, John, you make a great point. We're speaking with John McMullen, covers the Eagles, and right now you can read on 97.3ESPN.com his story entitled "Could Traffic Derail the Eagles?" And this is exactly what John is laying out right now. I feel like 2017 was a good example of what we're talking about. There were several players on one-year deals. Some of them, to your point, Ryan, were able to parlay that, like Patrick Robinson. Mm-hmm. Almost found the fountain of youth there after a miserable training camp and got a huge deal. But then there are other guys where winning a Super Bowl doesn't necessarily help them. And I think LeGarrette Blount's a perfect example. He won one in New England and then was a free agent until May when the Eagles signed him. Then he won, and he only got a one-year deal from the Lions. So, yes, he was able to find work, but it didn't – being the good guy who let Jay Ajayi come in and being the great teammate helped the Eagles win a Super Bowl, it didn't help him, per se, improve his financial situation.
There was a time, just to chime in on that, where when Jay Ajayi came in, LeGarrette Blount was clearly not happy.
Absolutely.
And luckily – shortly after that acquisition, John, and please chime in on this, they were winning, and that kind of eased the pain from LeGarrette Blount, and I'm sure their personalities maybe clicked, and he liked them, and things kind of went on from there. But if you don't have the same personality as someone that comes in and you lose a couple games and you're not getting the touches, that's when things, I guess, could have the potential.
And John's point about the vacuum comes in here, too, is that just because it worked well in 2017 doesn't mean in 2019 with a similar core but a set of different players that everybody's going to be in all buy-in mode again. It certainly helps to win, but you just never know.
Yeah, and I think there's also, you have to look at the context of where the players are. You know, LeGarrette had been, even though he was successful in New England coming off the great year, you know, he had bounced around from Tampa to Pittsburgh to New England back, a number of different teams. Where you look at players like Nelson and Jordan Howard coming off their rookie deals, where they still expect to make significant money. Yeah, from Jordan's standpoint, it's difficult for any running back in the current environment. But I think my point is they're in a different phase of their careers, so it could be more of an issue from their standpoint. Now, Darren Sproles, for instance, look, he's 36. He's going year by year. I talked about the rookies. He doesn't really have the cachet to complain. If Miles Sanders earns more playing time, you know, you say, okay, Darren, you're 36. We're going in a different direction. So I do think it's the context of the individual player, but it's going to be really difficult to get everybody involved and have everybody happy. And we've talked a lot about 11 versus 12 personnel. Look, everybody in that building thinks Dallas Goedert is going to be a star. And if you put him on the field for significant snaps, one of the receivers has got to come off the field.
Probably Nelson in the contract year. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So that's the kind of stuff I'm talking about.
I want to also change gears a little bit, John, and talk about injuries. They were a big issue last year with the team. And for context purposes, in 2017, after they won the Super Bowl, Howie decided he was going to basically kind of clean, well, not clean total house, but he made a lot of changes on the medical staff, including the head trainer, some of the team doctors. He also brought in a rehab specialist. And then last year, obviously, they went through many players having soft tissue injuries who were out for a long time. Howie made one change, I believe, this year, and like the head internist changed. But other than that, it's basically the same medical staff. Do you have concerns about, especially after with Miles Sanders missing all of the mini camps, that there may not have been enough changes, or that we should all be concerned about how this team will deal with soft tissue injuries, especially for a guy like Deshaun Jackson, who's had to battle them throughout his career?
No, not from a standpoint of the soft tissue injuries, and I think that's a little bit overblown. I think the bigger problem with the Eagles, and I've said this about the Sixers as well, and their medical staff, has been the messaging, and it makes them look bad. Like I always say, go online and look at the Eagles medical staff and look at their resumes and their history. It's a pretty impressive group who I think understands how to work through a hamstring injury. In other words, it's not very complicated for doctors at that level. What's complicated is the Eagles not giving out the proper information about somebody like Darren Sproles. Now, Jeff, you will know who works harder than Darren Sproles as far as
nobody.
Nobody, exactly. In an industry where everybody works out like a madman, Darren Sproles is legendary for his workout routine. And he was out for 10 games with a hamstring. Now, the Eagles we kept asking, is it more than a hamstring? What's going on? They said, no, it's just a hamstring. And then when Darren finally came back, he said he was dealing with more than a hamstring. So, and that was Darren Sproles, who, as I said, is legendary for his work ethic. But you had the fan base questioning his willingness to get back on the field. Why? Because the Eagles weren't being above board with the information, and nobody had the information of what he was dealing with. So I think the bigger issue And by the way, the reason they fired their medical staff after the Super Bowl, which is a strange way to do it, after you just are crowned the kings of your profession, is because of some leaked information. And they didn't want it out. And they didn't like the fact that one of the doctors spoke out of school. So that was what that was about. And that is the issue with the Eagles. It's got nothing to do with care. But I will say the second part of it, which is more concerning, is the players, all of a sudden, it seeps to them as well. And they start to question, am I getting the proper care? And I think it all has to do with messaging. I really do.
John, is there a chance that we may not see Deshaun Jackson on the field as much as we're maybe assuming or anticipating right now? Because I just thought it was interesting that, let's say he does go down with that hamstring. Okay, well, then more Dallas Goedert. Well, is there a chance that we see just a lot more of Dallas Goedert anyway, and D-Jax is on the field, I don't know, I'm just throwing numbers, 50% of the time instead of 75 or whatever it may be?
Well,
you mean
I
a camp?
do think
Do you mean
if
a
he's
camp?
healthy,
No,
he's
in the
be
regular
on
season.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, if he's healthy, he's going to be on the field. And if they do play more 12 because they want Dallas on the field, Nelson will be the one that suffers. Deshaun's going to be on the field if he's healthy.
Okay.
And he's always had hamstring issues. So I wouldn't be surprised if he misses 2 or 3 games at some point in the season. But when he's healthy, the 2 receivers you expect to get most of the workload are Deshaun Jackson and Alshon Jeffrey. So I think he's going to be out there. The question is, how many balls is he going to catch? Because that's where obviously Zach Ertz is going to be number 1. Alshon's going to be number 2. And Deshaun's going to be the field stretcher. So he might catch, say, 3-4 balls for 90 yards. Really, really impactful touches. But he does have a history, you got to be realistic, of wanting the football. And he's not the only good receiver that wants the football. Every good receiver that ever lived wants the football. So I do think that could be an issue at some point this season.
John, Rodney McLeod is someone we haven't really talked about. We know he's coming back from the knee injury last year. I believe it was the ACL and partial MCL, if I'm not mistaken on that. But he's coming back from that. The interesting thing with him is that he had his contract restructured in the offseason. It's basically a 1-year deal. And whenever you see a player willingly accept a pay cut and a 1-year deal, much like Tim Jernigan did after his unsupervised workout accident or whatever, then you start to wonder, well, is he going to be the player he was before? Why is he accepting this? Do you have any wonder or concern about what kind of player Rodney McLeod is going to be now coming back this year from that injury?
Yeah, I think there should be some concern. And I think people, and, you know, Chris Maragos just retired. I used him as an example.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, people just kind of assume that when you have surgery, you're going to come back and be the same player. Now, typically that does happen. And as long as you get through the rehab, everything's fine. But on occasion, and Chris is a perfect example, obviously something went wrong with his first surgery. And by the time he retired, 2 weeks ago, he was going in for his third surgery on what was a PCL injury.
Right.
And typically players come back from that. So I do think you have to wait and see with players that have some mileage on them like Rodney does. And that's part of the reason the contract was restructured. It's part of the reason Andrew Sendejo is here as a safety net. There is at least a little bit of concern. I don't think, you know, the reports out there that Ronald Darby's going to start on the PUP list. Rodney could. Brandon Brooks certainly will. Even players like Fletcher Cox and Jalen Mills, you have to watch. To me, July 24th, July 25th, that's not a concern, especially for veteran players. But you do have to watch injuries. And just assuming that guys are going to be back and be the exact same they were before the injury doesn't always happen like that.
Real quick, John, you're surprised around the NFC East. Alan Hearns released today by the Dallas Cowboys. I mean, we all saw the gruesome injury that he had in the playoffs, and it's good that he's even back being able to play football. And the Washington Redskins releasing their linebacker Mason Foster, which just a couple of months after they had released Zach Brown, right, who's now with the Eagles. So pretty
and
interesting.
Reuben Foster already got hurt.
Yeah, out for the year.
Season.
Right. What do you make of
The
that?
Redskins do some strange things.
Yeah, they definitely do. They definitely. And it's funny. I was just telling someone the other day. I really like what they've done in their defensive front. Having Montez Sweat and Ryan Kerrigan and the 2 Alabama first-round picks, Payne and John Allen. They look to me to be pretty good in the front seven. But I thought that was with Mason Foster as well. I thought he was a pretty decent linebacker.
Yeah, and especially with Reuben being out, you do need inside linebackers. So you're right; they're set outside. With Kerrigan and Montez Sweat. And I agree with you with the 2 Alabama big bodies up front. I think that's one of the strengths of their team, or at least it projected to be.
Right, and I don't want to forget Matt Ioannidis from Temple. I don't want the Temple people to get, he had 6.5 sacks last year. I got to get him in there too.
And Reuben Foster's got tremendous talent. We know the issues he had with San Francisco and why he ended up there. But if they could have gotten him on the field, which isn't going to happen, and now you're right. I mean, Zach Brown played very well for them last season, and now he's here. And Foster was a proven player as well. So it's a bit strange. But strange is kind of what they do. And, Trent Williams, we talked a little yesterday about the fact that he's not going to show up for camp. He doesn't want to play there, and he's their best player.
Yeah.
And I think the dysfunction, let's face it, it starts at the top. It starts with Daniel Snyder. It starts with Bruce Allen. It's a bad organization.
It's a good thing they got Eric Flowers there. They can move him over from left guard to left tackle if Trent Williams decides to, hold out real long.
Be very similar.
They're
you
all
won't
set.
be able to tell the difference between Trent Williams and Eric Flowers. But for the Cowboys, I think Alan Hearns, it was more from his perspective. He wants to see what's out there because the Cowboys have obviously shifted, and they now have Amari Cooper, who's a star player, and they also brought in Randall Cobb as well.
Right.
So there's not as much room for somebody like Hearns coming off the injury. And I think he wants the Cowboys, from what I heard, wanted him back, but he wants to test and see if there's going to be an opportunity where he could maybe get some more playing time.
All right, Johnny Mac, man, we appreciate it. It's been awesome. I guess you will be at the NovaCare tomorrow for the start of training camp, correct? Bright and early?
Thursday.
I'm sorry. I was right the first time.
Noon.
Thursday.
Players report tomorrow.
Gotcha.
So you'll get to see the goofy TV questions, but wait for the good questions on Thursday.
Awesome. Well, we'll definitely be catching up with you tomorrow and the rest of the week as training camp is about to begin. Everybody's excited, man. I know you are too.
Yeah, happy training camp week, and at least it's not going to be 115, so that's positive.
Knock on wood. Not this week. No, it will not be. That's John McMullen. He comes courtesy of the Boardwalk Honda Hotline, as he does every day at 4 o'clock.